Gaze reading where the greats drop by. Trendy authors tell us all the who, what, and why. Anyone can listen, cause we're spoiler free. Gaze reading, from Pulitzer stars to book club picks, where the curious minds can get their fix. So you say you're not gay, well that's okay. There's something for everyone. Gaze reading.
Hello and welcome to Gaze Reading. I'm your host, Jason Blitman. Welcome back. I'm so happy to have you here. If you don't know, you could watch some of these videos on YouTube. The link to the Gaze Reading YouTube channel can be found on our link tree and in the show notes. Speaking of our link tree, you could find that over on our Instagram, which is at Gaze Reading. Make sure to give us a follow. We have giveaways happening all of the time. And on today's episode, we have the fantastic Eliot Schrefer talking to us about his book, The Brightness Between Us, which is the follow-up book to his lovely, delightful space romance, The Darkness Outside Us. And on today's episode, I have the fantastic guest gay reader, Arielle Egozi, talking to me about her book, Being Bad. If you like what you're hearing, please share us with your friends, follow us, like us, subscribe wherever you get your podcasts, and if you can, leave us a 5-star review. It helps make other book lovers find Gaze Reading as well. And if you don't know, I'm so excited that we're partnering with Aardvark Book Club to provide an exclusive introductory discount. New members in the United States can join today. Enter the code Gaze Reading at checkout to get their first book for $4 with free shipping. Those books are usually $17. You can get them for $4, and they are terrific books that you're dying to read. I am sure of it. Aardvarkbookclub.com. Use the code Gaze Reading. And now, welcome Eliot Schrefer. Eliot Schrefer, welcome to Gaze Reading.
Thank you. That means.
Does anyone call you Shref?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I have an ex who calls me Shref.
Oh, that doesn't really set me up for success.
It wasn't his problem. The problem wasn't the pronunciation of my name. It was other things got in the way. Shref was just fine. My heart was broken by the last person to call me Shref. Yeah. Nice to talk to you.
Great. Cool. It just said, like, Eliot Schrefer, Shref just seemed like it jumped out at me as what one might call you. Anyway.
Yeah, just high school, get in the car, Shref. We're going to Denny's.
Oh, I love that. I certainly don't want to bring back any trauma. Okay, for folks that might not have read The Darkness Outside Us, it has perhaps been on their shelf just like it was on mine, and they've been waiting to read it. The Brightness Between Us is its sequel, and I want to hear its elevator pitch. But if we are unfamiliar with the first one, can you like tie it up in a little bow, give us a little segue for both books?
It's a challenging ask, but I'll try it. I can just see you doing some montage music, and then it's 20 minutes later. But let's try this.
Right.
So Darkness Outside Us takes place 400 years in the future, and there are two young astronauts who are put on a space mission, a last-ditch rescue effort for the older sister of one of those two boys who's gone missing on the colony of Titan, one of the moons of Saturn. And they have to work together, even though they're from the two warring countries that remain in the world. It's locked into kind of a Cold War. And they work together to make the mission succeed. But as they get closer to the rescue, they start to realize that the mission is not at all what they thought it was going to be. And so I know part of your theme music is that you don't reveal the plot. I will say,
to be
that
fair,
is a twist.
this conversation is about the second book. And the first book has been out for a few years now. So you can listen, the second book is about the same characters. So we know there's more to say.
Right. They're not dead. Right. So we find out about halfway through the first book, the mission is absolutely not what they think. And they have a really shocking conclusion to that part of the book. And then we discover that they are actually on a mission that's going to take 10,000 years, and that they are traveling across the universe to settle a new colony in a distant exoplanet. By the time they arrive, we find out that civilization on Earth has been destroyed. And so it's basically, this new colony is literally like Adam and Steve, not Adam and Eve. And actually, when the book gets banned and challenged, people are really angry about it. And I'm like, if you actually read the book, you'd be even angrier, because I'm actually like trying to place like radical queer agenda. Like, I've got your agenda.
100%.
But the second book goes 16 years into the future, and we look at the young family of these two boys who are now 36-year-old dads and their kids that they're trying to raise through this hardscrabble little house on the prairie, but light years away. And we also flash back to the original Ambrose and Kodiak on the original planet, the first time they met. and they get to know each other. So we jump 30,000 years in time and then across the galaxy as well.
Yeah.
So there was a lot of spreadsheeting as I was trying to, it was a lot of moving pieces.
And I was just in conversation last night with Laura Dave, who writes thrillers and mysteries. And she is a self-proclaimed pantser. And I was like, how can you be a pantser when you're writing a thriller? Like, don't you have to know what's coming? Yeah, I couldn't imagine writing a book that spanned thousands of years without having a sense of how the universe was functioning.
Yeah.
I think those were very good, brief elevator pitches.
Well, hopefully we're on an elevator ride that's 10 stories and not 4 stories, because otherwise
an elevator
doors
ride
open
into
and closed.
space. It can last generations.
That's right.
I have some hard-hitting questions to ask about the book itself, but before we get into those, there is a TV show that the siblings in The Brightness Between Us are able to watch. It's like the only show. It's called Pink Lagoon. It's the only thing that they're able to watch over and over again. What is your Pink Lagoon? What would, if you were in space and could only pick one thing, what would it be?
Wow. So first of all, I gave them Pink Lagoon because the world building that would be required to actually have 16-year-olds that had no Earth references whatsoever, like how civilization worked and how societies and groups worked, was too hard. And so I needed to have them be able to watch the show so they would understand like what a school used to be and what government was and all that. But for me, so I actually this morning, it's in my hard-hitting, really hard-working writer life, I was watching season 44 of Survivor after I watched seasons 1 through 43. I always wait till they finish and then I had to binge it all. So as far as quantity of TV watched, Survivor, I've spent 10,000 hours. I'm like a Malcolm Gladwell.
Wow. Have you ever thought about going on?
I've applied. I talked to a producer. I got to the second round, but she told me that my personality is too small for TV. It was crushing. It was crushing.
That's like the worst thing someone could say.
Oh my God, it was brutal. It gave me so much sympathy for my writing students when I give them hard feedback, because she like looked at this video I'd spent hours trying to really get right. And she saw it and she was like, your personality is just a little small, baby. It's fine. Like you can do other things. So the story I tell myself is that I have more of a PBS personality than a CBS personality. That's how I'm surviving this. But if anyone...
You are a survivor.
If Jeff Probst is listening to Gaze Reading right now, I'm willing to try again.
Yeah, I wonder, do they have like international Survivor franchises like they do some other
They do an Australian one. I know that, and it was pretty popular. I'm not sure otherwise. Yeah.
Because I was going to say maybe your personality would fit better in like a different...
The Danish Survivor, like
yes,
it's a more mild-mannered.
You're like way too vibrant for the Danes. Who do I need to write to?
I want to be on it, and then I would show up, and like day 2, I'd start crying, and I would never stop. Like I would be that messy one.
I had been a Big Brother fan a long time ago, and then fell off the wagon, and then came back to it a couple of years ago, probably during COVID. But that is probably a good show for you.
Okay,
Big Brother.
Well,
it's Survivor in a house.
You just curse my workload now, because I know that one also has many seasons to watch.
I know, it really does. There's one currently on right now, so that can be where you're starting. Or honestly, the last couple seasons have also been pretty good.
You need to just email my editor and apologize for me and say it's your fault. This is really terrible news you're giving me.
Sorry, but we're promoting the book. This is important. Although I will say this current season, there's a lot of conversation about AI and like deep fakes and stuff. And so it certainly fits in the universe of Brightness Between Us.
When it's interesting, actually, Survivor, I feel like the gays do really well on that show. And I think there's individual episodes where the alliances shift from the male alliance and the female alliance. And there's a way in which this like empathetic ear and having a facility with crossing gender groups, which you see the men, they'll knock down the physical challenges early on, but the straight men especially start to find it really hard to collaborate with women. And you realize like all the roadblocks that are in there, not to overgeneralize, but there's something about this, like having figured out how to operate in a world that as children or as teenagers was hostile to us, that becomes useful when you're in a inherently hostile environment like Survivor.
Yeah, we're professionals.
I will make you love me.
Exactly. I'm just trying to be my truest self, my authentic self. Okay, so Survivor would be your show. Similarly, who is your Devin Mujaba?
So for those who haven't read the book, Devin Mujaba is the heartthrob pop star in the first book, who actually becomes a fairly significant character in the second book. And he's from this like ridiculous group called the Heartspeak Boys. I almost did BOIS, but I was like, 400 years from now, are they still going to have BOIS for boys? I don't
Probably
think so.
not.
Yeah, I don't think so. But
although BOYZ is evergreen.
Oh yeah, it's eternal. Yeah. I should have done Heart Speak Boys 2 Man. Just really gone for it. Who is my Devin Mujaba? I tend to idolize female pop stars over male pop stars. I think I am pretty basic. I'm like, I'll always go to a Sarah Bareilles concert or Chapel Roan if I wouldn't feel weird being middle-aged at a Chapel Roan concert.
It's so funny that your first thing that you said is Sarah Bareilles, because not to put salt in a wound, but probably what the Survivor producer would have wanted to hear is Madonna or Pink or
I missed my demo.
Sarah Bareilles is very low key.
I thought you were going to say, because surprise, the special guest for the second half of the episode is Sarah Bareilles. I'm like, Sarah, I was waiting for you.
I wish. No, she's so chill compared to she doesn't have fireworks at her shows.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Like in Girls 5 Eva, was she the Renee Elise Goldberry character? No, she was the one who was working at a pizzeria and raising a kid.
That's right. I love her so much. I had a question. Okay, wait. No, I'm not allowing this answer because part of Devin Mujaba, part of the lore, the appeal is that he's like someone these characters would want to sleep with. Yeah. So give me anyone. They don't have to be a pop star. Who would your one celebrity be?
Oh.
If you could find yourself awake in a hotel room next to a celebrity, who would that be?
I'm going to be so mad later because no one immediately comes to mind, and it seems like a real nice opportunity not to put this out in the universe.
I know, we have to secret it out. Come on.
I could get a DM in a few weeks. Gosh, over the course of my lifetime, Brendan Fraser has been near the top for a long time. So just for longevity's sake. I can see you're not satisfied with that answer either. I feel like I'm not.
No, I just wasn't expecting it.
I know. He's outside
George of the Jungle, bring it on.
Absolutely. There was some tone there.
I will say, I don't know that I have an answer either. So you're not alone. If someone were to ask me the question, I'm not 100% sure who I would say.
Yeah. Is there a pop star that you would write into your sequel?
I don't know. I don't think so.
So you're not going to get on Survivor either.
No.
You need your brand to be a little sharper.
I will say, you talking about your experience not getting on.
That is salt in the wound, Jason.
Okay. I'm like just talking about very specific things that are in your book before we go on to some more general things. Can you share with our listeners what wake sleep is?
Oh. Yes. So wake sleep does not exist in the first book, but it's in Brightness Between Us. There is a mission. Ambrose and Kodiak are two handsome young men, have to go on journeying across Scotland during wartime to get to a place they need to go to. Ambrose brings this high-tech substance called wake sleep, which cycles you through your sleep cycles, but doesn't ever shut down consciousness while you're doing it. So you can be fully rested at the end of 8 hours, but you've taken this drug that keeps you alert and awake while you're doing it. But because it always struck me as really wild. We do this thing, we do it every night so we don't even notice it, but we close our eyes and become unconscious for 8 hours if we're lucky, or 5 hours if we're not lucky, and wake up. And then we were there and totally vulnerable and laying there. It just seems crazy, especially during a condition of war. And I was imagining 400 years in the future, I'm sure they would have figured out some way to avoid this wasted, very helpless time that we have in sleep. So I invented it.
Any technology that I've read about in a book that is fictional, that is the one. I was like, this is what I want. I want wake sleep. Who do we need to write to? Who do we know in the pharmaceutical business?
We should run an ad right now during your podcast. Like, are you feeling symptoms of sleep? Call your doctor and ask him about wake sleep.
I'm one of those people who really doesn't get much more than 5 or 6 hours of sleep. I don't know why. I just can't do it. Maybe I have FOMO and I just want to be in the world.
It's so frustrating. It happened to be the moment I turned 40, I stopped being able to sleep more than 5. And I missed those days in my 20s when I would fall asleep and wake up 10 hours later and smile into the dawn. Those days are gone.
I was never a 10-hour sleeper, but it's very upsetting to me that I cannot sleep more than 5 or 6-ish hours. So I need wake sleep. That's really, I don't know where that came from in your imagination, but it's important to me that we figure out who we can reach out to.
Someone's working on it. It's one of the things with science fiction, I think. So it's 400 years in the future. Most of the stuff that, even you ask people in the 60s what they thought 2020 would be like, and they would all say it's like flying cars, right? That was what all their visions of the future were. And that is not what we're doing. We're doing other stuff like internet. And I think when I'm imagining 400 years in the future, I just didn't even try to imagine the straightforward general tech movement. But instead, I tried to think of some unusual, surprising things that I could drop in that no one would expect. And wake sleep was one of those things, just for the world building part. Because Like I have people like they use the bracelets to communicate, but that's all kind of vanilla sci-fi. Like you can just pull that one out of a sci-fi hat, and that's everyone's doing that. I just like figured, what else can we drop in there? And there's also the
Right.
idea of like pleasure satellites that you would be able to like just go up to something in orbit, and it's just like a giant nightclub like over the Earth with these zero gravity dance clubs where you would be dancing over open air, just like staring down 5 miles to the ground below, but dancing and it's propelling you up in the sky. Not that I would ever do it. I'd be like gripping the walls like in the roller rink when I was in sixth grade. But it just seemed okay. Like that's a scene I can feel an emotional content to it. I can get my teeth into it. It feels it belongs in a scene with humans in it. And a lot of sci-fi can feel cold and like it's tech building just for its own sake. And I'm less interested in that. So right.
The first book to now, it's not like you waited 10 years between books. So there haven't been tremendous changes in technology, but you can't really say nothing has changed, right? There has been a lot of, even AI a year ago is not talked about in the way that it is today. Did you find that watching trends and transitions, I know you just said you really thought about different things for 400 years from now, but did how things were going in the last 3 or 4 years change your perspective on how you were writing technology for this book?
Yeah, it's funny. I just lively wandered into AI for The Darkness Outside Us, which came out in 2021. I was writing it in 2019. And then it was, are there periods between the A and the I and after? Like it was sounding like this new thing I was dropping in there that I was like, are people going to remember that we're talking about this? And now it's, yeah, we're talking about it. Like we're definitely there. So it's serendipitous that I dropped it in. And that one thing, especially around AI that I was really interested in is the spaceship. It's like a metaphor. I hate it when writers preen over their own work, and I'm going to get a little bit preening here, but the spaceship
Preen away.
is like a metaphor for being alive, right? Like we don't get to know what's on the other side of being alive without being dead. And that's part of like why it's difficult to be a human being and with the mind. And that in a spaceship, you also, if you're not sure that the reality is true, you can't open the door and check, right? Because then you've opened the door to outer space and you're vented out and you die. And the AI I wanted in the ship, and the book Darkness Outside is technically has 2 characters, but it really has 3. It's got the 2 boys plus the ship, which has this whole personality and different voices, including Devin Mujaba's and Ambrose's mom's voice. But it also is incredibly perceptive. So it can use like the sound of the boy's pulse to check their emotional states. So even if no matter where they are in the ship, it's recording what their pulse level is. It's measuring their pupil dilation. It's trying to figure out. So it's like something you can't keep a secret from. It's like this all-seeing parent figure. And that I just love, I feel like all books should be thrillers in some way. And I love the idea of being stuck with something that might be an enemy that has all the power. And what do you do? How do you wrest some of the power back for yourself? And the AI was one way to do it. And I think I'm not sure where AI is going to lead us, but for the sake of a ship and a monitoring structure is a good way to bring up some tension for the characters.
Yeah. No, I would agree. I was just talking to an author recently about my frustrations with the Pixar movie Up.
Tell me.
Are you familiar?
Yeah.
The guy who ends up being the bad guy in the movie is an explorer, not an inventor. There are inventions in the context of the story that don't really they were there out of convenience, not out of making any dramaturgical sense for the story. And so that really bothered me. If the guy was an inventor who lost his way while exploring, I could get on board. Anyway, all of that to say, all of the technology that lives within the world of both of these books felt warranted and felt a part of the world that it was a part of. So I can only compare it to one that I didn't feel that way about.
Yeah. My goal was I want to be people's first sci-fi book. People that are like, sci-fi is not for me. It's going to be 10 pages about the history of some country, and then we're going to just move on really quickly. And sci-fi has a history of having really brittle emotions, and it reads like a Wicked article, right? Where the characters are a little bit shallow. There's certainly plenty of sci-fi that doesn't work that way. And I wanted get the emotional juice as high as possible to compensate for the inherent chilliness that can come with science fiction universes.
Yeah.
Really cool.
Science fiction is really not typically my genre. And I think that might be why I loved Brightness Between Us so much, because it's really this family story in a package of sci-fi. And it was it was almost like the YA version of Sea of Tranquility by Emily St. John Mandel.
Love that book.
Which is also such a terrific book. And I don't think of it as sci-fi first. even though like you look at the cover and like it is
like a moon colony. Yeah.
and
Some
again
hallmarks.
that wouldn't typically be my sort of story, and this I really loved it. I had something profound to talk to you about.
It's going to be the meaning of life. And
my husband used to work in NFTs, in the NFT space, and talk about things that like we're not talking about anymore. Right? That's just not on anyone's radar. But AI, for better or for worse, probably isn't going away.
Yeah. Some listener just now pulled out their certificate, some NFT they bought in 2021 and now it's a
Sorry,
coaster,
guys.
or they're going to use it as wallpaper. I guess some valuable. I never was really.
No, I think people who even bought it are not still 100% sure what they are. You have a master's degree in animal studies?
That's right.
Obsessed. Their yaks play a big role, and you have a degree in animal studies, so you probably have a really good answer to why yaks.
Why yaks? This is anyone who was listening 30 seconds ago and went to go blow their nose and came back like, wait, what? You're still
Also, why are you blowing your nose? This is a very interesting podcast.
Yeah, exactly. Pause it next time you're going to blow your nose and you intro to the yak question.
Pay close attention.
So I've been really fascinated by following one of the papers I wrote in this master's program for animal studies was on the de-extinction movement, which is they're trying to, and they've already brought back a species of rat that went extinct, and they brought it back just using the DNA. And then they used a living rat's egg and they put that DNA in it. And then now we have that rat.
Didn't we all see Jurassic Park? Don't we know this is a bad idea?
But wasn't it exciting at the same time? Yeah. My favorite in Jurassic Park is like they get strapped into the ride that is going to be the future theme park run that explains like DNA transfer for everyone. It's like Clippy the paperclip from Microsoft basically is explaining. That movie is excellent. That movie is so excellent. So the extinction movement is looking at what would it be like to bring back a mammoth? And we have the DNA from mammoths because they all got snowed in Siberia. But you could put that in a closest relative is an elephant. You put it in an elephant's ovum, put that DNA in, and potentially they could have a baby mammoth. But the thing that no one thought about, and this is where the Jurassic Park part comes in, is that that baby mammoth wouldn't have a parent. There is no adult mammoth to tell it how to be a mammoth. And we have thought about animals as these sort of evolutionary cogs that don't have internal lives. But anyone, look at your dog or your cat, you know exactly. They develop a personality based on what they're around when they're young, just like humans do. And you could have a really psychotic mammoth because that has no one to tell it how to be a social creature, how to exist in this group. I imagined on this planet that they had sent the ship with embryos for animals that they could raise and have a sort of a farm there. But the scientists, which seemed probable to me, the scientists wouldn't have thought about the emotional lives of those animals. And so they raise these baby yaks, but they never had parents. And so the yaks become territorial and aggressive and their big adversary on this planet. And so it's this scary enemy. And I think I chose a yak because they have these giant horns. And for those, since most of my readers are here in America, who knows how a yak should act? So no one's going to call me and say, I have 3 yaks and they would never behave that way. I figured I would skip the angry readers. Yeah. Flashing out.
That's so funny.
I'm not sure. I did my yak research, but I'm not too sure how a yak acts.
And what's frustrating as well, to the point of exactly what you're describing, is that we don't know how mammoths are supposed to act either. And so we can't even artificially parent the mammoth.
There was this American Life segment about a guy who he had a bull, one of his cattle, this bull that he just loved. It was his favorite bull that he had ever raised, and it died, and he cloned it. And the new one just kept attacking him. Like it was not this bull that he had lost. It was a different animal, even though it had the same DNA. And that kind of haunted me. And I think something I'm interested in examining through this sci-fi context is human relationship to non-human animals and the way that we treat them and treat the broader world and what the implications are even way off in the future.
Speaking of way off in the future, because that's what your books are about, how do you sleep at night? Does this get overwhelming?
I have wake sleep. I'm the first test case for wake sleep, so it's all
I'll send you my address.
Yeah. Carl Sagan has this wonderful piece of writing. It's basically a poem. I think he would have called it poem, but it's called Pale Blue Dot. And it's about what it was like in the 60s to first see Earth from the outside. And that you realize that we are this little speck in this big cosmos. And all the things that seem to matter so much, like kings and queens rising and falling, epidemics, individual lives, even just individual species, seem to matter so much less in that scale. And my husband and I have this theory about each other that he is the exuberant pessimist. So he thinks everything is going to shit, but he's always high energy and excited despite that. So he's just like complaining, but really happy. You're going to say which one of these you are. You.
I literally I have underneath my yak question is, are you a melancholy optimist or an exuberant pessimist? And perhaps your husband is the other.
Yes, we have a theory that all couples roles eventually, like you'll steer towards them. And I'm the melancholy optimist, where I basically think everything's going to be fine, but nothing matters as a result of that. We're just on a hunk of rock going around this gaseous ball in a solar system, so it doesn't really matter, which is insufferable to be around, because should we go to this Chinese restaurant or that one? And I'm like, the snacks are so low. This question, that's really fun on a Saturday night. Hang out with the exuberant pessimists instead. We're melancholy optimists, Eeyores walking through.
No, exuberant optimists are the ones who get on Survivor.
They're faking it. No one's an exuberant optimist. Maybe like Kristen Chenoweth. I think it might be an exuberant optimist. Even she might just be playing the part for the Today Show. But yeah, so I think I'm definitely a melancholy optimist. I forgot that I put it in the book, actually.
You did.
Yeah. We have all these different theories about different personas that couples take on within their relationship.
Like what else?
One binary is the satisfizer and the maximizer. That one person will increase options at all times. So say you have to buy TV or a couch. That person is, here are the 10 ones that we should consider. I'm not sure if the screen quality is good here, but this one is so ugly looking. And where would the cable go if we bought this one? And they can't choose. It's every time they have to choose something, they feel like they're grieving all the choices they can't make anymore. Like all those other options died because they had to choose one. And then the satisfizer is someone who doesn't increase options, doesn't actually do the research or propose where we should go for Christmas break, but can choose. Okay, we'll just do that one. That you need both. Someone like lays up the field and the other one just makes a choice of whatever the thing is.
Yeah. Which one are you?
Do you have a guess?
The first one.
No, I'm the satisfizer. Yeah. I just make the choice, but
I get the vibe of you'd be disappointed not getting that other thing that you didn't get to choose, but I guess not.
No, because that's part of the melancholy optimism, because it doesn't, what TV you have doesn't matter, because we're all going to die.
You'll just make the choice.
Yeah.
Oh, I wonder if all of the melancholy optimists are, I've forgotten the words already, but the second one that you described.
Yeah, comment below. Let us know.
I think my husband and I are almost like a mix of the two. We're like blended a little bit because he is very good. Yeah, maybe. He's a very good optimal stopper. He taught me about optimal stopping,
It sounds like tantric.
Basically, let's say you are trying to figure out what TV to buy, and you have a certain number of parameters, right? And it has to be 4D. It has to fit on a certain wall, so it can only be max a certain size, and you don't want to spend more than X amount of dollars. And when you find the TV that checks the most of those boxes is when you stop. Or there is some algorithm of you have to see at least X number. And then after you hit that number, the first one that checks the most boxes is the one that you're supposed to stop on.
Yes. It's the
there's an algorithm.
Bachelor dating problem, I think, is what mathematicians call it. Imagine a game show where you went on and there were 40 bachelors and you were going to try to get the best date you could out of it. How far do you go? But each one you could either say, I want to try someone new, or I'm going to stick with you. But you can't go back to anyone that you've already seen before. So
right.
Like how far do you go? Because you don't want to take the first one, because there could be someone even better out there, right? So how far do you go and when do you stop?
It's funny that you say this, because this has come up on one other episode of Gaze Reading before, and that's with Holly Gramazio and her book, The Husbands, which is literally that. There are endless husbands that keep coming down from this woman's attic. And it's like, when does she know to pick the one? How do you find the one?
That's great. That's a great premise.
I know.
I think mathematicians say you go halfway and then you pick the one that's better than anyone you've seen before. Or maybe it's 2/3.
I'm sure it's all a version of that. And then of course you have Dan Savage, who says something like, you're never going to find the one. So you find the one that's 0.86 or whatever and round up to the one.
Oh, that's lovely.
What does Dan Savage know?
I'm kidding.
I'm sure he knows a lot. He's been in the business for a very long time. Something that comes up in the brightness between us is the world must be broken to be rebuilt. Do you feel like that's what's happening right now?
Oh. That's also, I would say that's not really the book's theory. It's a character's theory within the book, is that
it comes up in the book.
Yes.
It's not what the book is about. Right.
It's a character we've already discussed, actually. Well, says this and does extreme things in order to try to wreck the world so it can be reborn in a better way. This is my controversial take, is I think right now things aren't as terrible as we talk and the way we say it is.
Yeah.
That when you think back to really looking at each region period in history, like you find like 1,000 years ago, we're living to 32. People would just come and raise your village and rape and murder. There was no going to a university, finding your found family somewhere else. Like there weren't options that you even had. And that we find that I think it's better now, but I think it's always our tendency as humans to think whatever we're going through is unprecedented and awful. And it's think about in the 1940s, people were looking at this catastrophic world war and the end of the world order. And we are seeing conflict now and terrible things now, but I think that fact has always been there. And I don't think we're in a grand bonfire now. I think the bonfire has always been going. Did I just inadvertently quote a song? Oh, it's been burning since. Now we're going to have to pay rights for the song.
It was like slightly hummed and contextual.
Yeah, as long as you don't do more than seven notes, I think you don't have to pay rights, right? Is that how it works?
I feel like that is an urban legend,
It's
but
probably
maybe
an urban
not.
legend, yeah.
In line with what you're saying, something that I did find the book to be about is learning from the past. Not to give anything away about the book, but that I think is maybe where the disconnect is for what we're dealing with in the world right now. You're right in that are we in this place of feeling like the world is a dumpster fire because we're not paying attention to the history? We're not saying, oh no, we actually still have it much better off than 100 years ago, less than.
Yeah. Yeah. And do we live our lives as chippers, trying to make things a little bit better? And by that, putting that all together, that it will finally improve over the long term? Or is it better to wreck things and redefine? I get furious with people who say the two-party system is broken and I'm not voting for either one because that's just, I don't want to support this Democrat-Republican system when it has such tangible consequences and is so awful. So in that way, I think I'm a chipper philosophy-wise. So do the best you can out of the options you have, but I'm not someone who's going to break the wheel and reform it. But that's something like I was channeling my inner Daenerys Targaryen when I was thinking about break the system. Because I think I love that about Game of Thrones was that it was all these feudal lords vying for power and someone just walking in. Let's just not do this feudal lord thing, right? Just redo it.
There's something interesting too, though, about reinventing the wheel, but let's use the wheel we have until the wheel has been reinvented, right? You want to break it down and come up with a new plan? Cool. But in the meantime, still only have the one plan.
Yeah, you could buy the starter, be fixing it up, and still stay in your rental while you're fixing it up. You don't have to live on plywood.
Exactly. You would never move into a house that was not
right.
You just wouldn't. And that is what I feel like people are doing. It's wait, the house isn't done. There's no roof.
Yeah, I think that's very wise. I think that's a great metaphor for it.
Speaking of metaphor, look at you transitioning for me. You were talking about the ship being a metaphor for life. I don't want to give anything away, so I'm not going to provide any context outside of what I'm about to say. Am I crazy, or did I see a metaphor for mental health in the second book?
Yes. Yeah. So there's a character who has finds spaces and drives in his mind that he didn't expect and that no one around him expected. And yeah, I was leery of how to present that as someone I've had periods of depression, but nothing that was ever diagnosed and nothing that I have felt I needed the diagnosis for. But beyond that, I don't really have an experience with mental health crises. And I was worried about this character has had something altered in his mind outside of his control, but it feels to him like mental illness, like this psychotic break. And so I was very leery, and I thought about how a variety of readers would respond to that. As someone who doesn't have a history of mental illness, it seemed like an interesting plot movement to me, and I knew it might feel very different for someone else. So I had a couple friends read the book who had one with a bipolar diagnosis, another one with depression, just to see like, how does this land for you? And took their notes and thought about it. So I was presenting the character, but it definitely felt like there are ways in which you do get these surprises that come up within you, like drives and instincts and impulses. You're like, I thought I knew who I was, and I wasn't who I was on Saturday night or whatever. So I think I was interested in exploring that.
Yeah, no, it definitely felt very honest. Something that comes up, again, generally speaking, there's a quote in the book, the hard part isn't not knowing things, it's not knowing what I don't know. And that is like among the keys to my own anxiety. I was like, I am most anxious about the things I do not know. I have a lot of health anxiety, and I always say to my therapist and my doctors, I'm just like, I am not worried about something bad happening to me. I'm worried something bad is happening to me, and I do not actually know about it.
Can I get just a full body scan every Monday morning, and you can just
And
have the
it's
cancer
interesting.
started growing in me over the weekend?
Said to my husband, I want to do one of those, but upon doing some research, studies are showing that that can be almost worse off for people who have health anxiety because a full body scan picks up anything and things are not necessarily important or worth talking about.
Yeah. And maybe the
Um,
anxiety is doing something for you. Like I have a friend who she believes she gets so anxious about flying. She still flies a lot, but she sits there and doesn't want to distract herself. And she's just like holding the arms of her chair because she feels like the fact that she's so worried about it means that this time the plane can't go down because she's so nervous that it will, and that she's outsmarted the plane, and that it's her anxiety keeping it aloft.
God,
So in a way, I think it actually gives her the feeling of power over it. Like
power,
the
sure.
force, the sheer force of her worry is keeping everyone safe.
It's interesting you say that because I do think I have called myself a hypochondriac to doctors before, and they're like, no, you are not a hypochondriac. And they explain to me how someone who truly is a hypochondriac would behave. And the idea that I think rationally about my health and also go to the doctor and don't just sit and stew and worry and hold on to the metaphorical armrests, that's how I'm different from someone who's actually a hypochondriac. So, anyway, seeing that in the book, I was like, oh, that just really hit a deep part of me.
Yeah. When how do
In
you?
addition,
Yeah. When it's about, it's why the kind of the Matrix was so scary. This idea that their perceived reality might just be because aliens are keeping us in a stupor and milking us for our bodily fluids. So, like, how would you know that this isn't a simulation? Like, how do you break it? And the spaceship is a way to get literal about it. They really don't know if anything is true about where they are. They could be underground in a model spaceship and not actually out in space because they've both woken up without any memories. And so that feels very, and I think I spent an inordinate amount of time worried about that kind of stuff, especially when I was like 13. Like, why does anything matter? We don't even know that this is true.
and then you saw the Truman Show.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I'm waiting to run into the dome at the edge of my existence and find out.
I know.
So now open a roof.
There are some really weird things that happen in my life where every once in a while I'm like, am I sure this is not a simulation? The other thing that touches deeply in my anxiety is that the heart is not the wiser organ. My brain fully understands this thing that I'm anxious about, but my heart is feeling a different way. And it's tremendously frustrating because they're not in conversation with each other.
Yeah. It's a little pet peeve of mine, that this feeling that if you can't figure something out, just stop worrying about it, follow your heart, follow your intuition instead. And that works for a lot of cases, especially like interpersonal things. But for like broader justice, the heart isn't really wise because it just cares about what's around you, who you've empathized with recently. So the idea of doing action to help people in another country that you have never met, like the heart isn't especially inclined to do that. That's something your brain has to realize. Oh, it's actually very easy for me to give up $5,000 that will absolutely change the lives of someone who's in this war-torn country. That is something the brain's really good at and that the heart is less good at. I have complete love and acceptance for being gay, but I still feel shame around it. And that's always going to be there, even though it's not reasonable. It's just something like you were brought up within that structure of how the life is supposed to look, and I'm not living it.
And some of it too is also about judgment, right? It's because you might feel a certain way, but then the person that you're next to on the subway when you're holding hands with your partner might not feel that way, and then you're being judged, and then there's the animal instinct of fear and protecting yourself. There's all of that on top of it.
Yeah. I always wonder about all the times that I feel like someone's been judging me or me and my husband, and they might just have like indigestion.
Something my husband says all the time, like whenever there's someone cut someone off on the road or whatever, it's maybe that person just has diarrhea. And it's a really interesting way to go about life.
Or it's like when you're on stage presenting and there's that person in the audience, it's just like looks like they're just hating it. And they're the first question. They're like, this was so interesting. Thank you. Oh, you just have a resting face that looks like you're confused and mad.
Yeah. So you make it very clear that you never intended on writing a sequel to The Darkness Outside Us until I think how you put it is like a not the day two story came to you. Can you share a little bit about the evolution and how The Brightness Between Us came to be?
So Darkness Outside Us, its origin story involves going to the movies drunk when I was in college and seeing What Lies Beneath. the forgettable romantic thriller with Harrison
Wait, that's
Ford and
so
Michelle
funny
Pfeiffer.
that you say that, because when someone asks if I've ever seen quote unquote horror movies in theaters, that's literally the only movie that and
It's not count as a horror movie, Jason. It's like that and Dumbo. Those are the only horror movies I've ever seen.
how dare you? Dumbo is horrifying. It's
Okay,
tragic.
it's absolutely horrifying. There's a reason my subconscious said that.
Anyway, that's one of the quote unquote scary movies that I've seen in theaters.
It's
Is what
not
my
even
opinion.
like
So you say it's
Music and
forgettable,
Spirits.
and it literally was formative for me.
It was formative for me too. Like this whole book came out of it because I was halfway through and the movie makes no sense. Like it really doesn't hold together. And Michelle Pfeiffer is trying to figure out what's going on. And I'm also trying to figure out what's going on. And like, just like they must have cut out some important scenes and like to make
Michelle
the running
Pfeiffer,
time.
the performer, not the character.
So she's
She's in the
actor.
movie being like, what is going on?
Like looking to camera, is this really the scene? And so the theory I hatched in my mind was that like she had been cloned, that there were like 20 copies of Michelle Pfeiffer down in the basement, that we were seeing different Michelle Pfeiffers in each of these scenes. That's the only way the movie would make sense. And it finished, and that was not the reveal. And that was, to me, I was like, oh, I like that version better. I like the Michelle Pfeiffer, the cloned Michelle Pfeiffer. And so that's the origin for Darkness Outside Us. And that just lived in my mind for a while until I came up with the like spaceship and the romance and all that between these two boys. The brightness between us actually owes a lot to my mother-in-law. She was in town and we went out for margaritas. I'm just like coming off like a drunken writer, like having, this is all booze the whole time. But we went out for
Tennessee Williams.
we went out for margaritas. I knew that I wanted to jump 16 years into the future for the second book. I didn't want to like just do day 2 because I think when sequels go wrong in my book, it's when they just like, keep the story going and it's the same story, just going months ahead with it. And I think that's when they can get boring or predictable. And for me, the best model for a sequel is Aliens versus Alien, which gives you the same pleasures, but changes the genre from Alien was like a slasher movie in space and Aliens is like a war movie in space. It's like a different kind of movie. And that was my dream, kind of sequel that felt that way. Like it continued the story, but it felt fundamentally different. And I said, I wanted to go back and look at OG, Ambrose and Kodiak, the original boys back on Earth. And how do I make these two storylines combine? And 2 margaritas in, we had an idea. That's why I dedicated the book to her, not just to get mother-in-law points, but she really was foundational.
Other than you having drinks with her, what did she like ask you questions about it? How did she like pull it out of you?
I guess so. Or she was probably just a receptive audience and said yes and did an improv thing, I think. But she had some really helpful thoughts. I think one thing I've always loved is the storytelling structure that was really popular in the 19th century, but you don't really see anymore, which is you would run 2 storylines going and you'd run one forward. It would reach a total cliffhanger. So you would not know, should she stay engaged to the nice guy or go with the bad boy? And then like you want to turn the page and find out who she's going to choose. And then we go to a different storyline. And then you won't find the answer to the first cliffhanger until you follow this storyline to its cliffhanger. And then you get to go back and get the pleasure of the resolution for the first one. But now you're reading forward to find out the answer for the second cliffhanger. And I just love that as a structure. And so that I took that as the kind of the skeleton for Brightness Between Us was to have this. I want 2 storylines that seem so disconnected. They're light years away. They're 30,000 years apart, but that the cliffhangers inform each other. You need one storyline to help you understand the other one. And if you're hungry for information, then you'll have to keep going in order to get the answers that you need to understand the other storyline.
Yeah. And it does a really nice job doing that. I think it was the end of one of the parts where I texted my friend Brad and I was like, you have to start reading those. It's so good. Put it down.
That's good. The other text I was imagining is like, he's such an asshole. He can't leave
No. And it's interesting that you say you didn't want it to feel like the same book. You wanted to change up the genre because it really doesn't feel like the same book. It feels like the same world, but it's not cookie cutter. You don't feel like you're experiencing the same story. This is the year of sequels. There are a lot of sequels to books coming out that the first one have been beloved. And so there's a little bit of a trend. And I will say this is among the first that just turns it on its head a little bit in a way that others are. I don't want to say more predictable because that's a disservice to the books. Sequels can be great. I'm a big fan of Grease 2.
I called it out at the first page. If you got an advanced copy, I call out Grease 2 as an example of a bad sequel. So I'm sorry about that. If you got a hardcover, you didn't see that. No, I actually
not in my galley.
They probably ripped it out because they did their research on you and knew that you would throw the book across the ring.
No, I have my dear reader letter, and
I mentioned Grease 2 in there. I don't. Maybe I
No.
cut it. Maybe I was
Maybe
worried
you
about
cut
just
it.
this moment and I cut it, and now I've still revealed myself as a hater.
To be a Grease 2 hater?
Yeah, Michelle Pfeiffer, actually. This is a true line now. She did a bravura performance in Grease 2. Sorry,
and she
Michelle.
stares in the camera and goes, what is this about?
What is happening? I don't know.
What is happening?
Like yelling back at the screen drunkenly. I don't know, Michelle.
You are not a cool writer. Anyway, this definitely turns out, this is what's hilarious is this is the third time Michelle Pfeiffer has come up in a week and a half. She really is having a moment. Anyway, congratulations on The Brightness Between Us. Big
Thank
fan.
you so much. Yeah.
Everyone go get your copy. This has been so fun.
Yeah, this has been really a blast. I was looking forward to this for a long time. And as I was doing the deep dive in all your podcast episodes, you have a very soothing voice. So I was just sitting there with my headphones. Like, it's a good feeling. So I'm a fan for life now.
I appreciate that. I was selling merchandise at the Lion King on Broadway, and I had a stranger from God knows where ask me if I ever thought of doing like voiceover work because I have a great voice. And that was the first time anyone had ever said anything like that to me. I find my voice very annoying, but I'm grateful that it tends to work in this medium.
I think I sound like Kermit the Frog whenever I hear a recording of my voice.
I don't think so.
Yeah, it's just
But if I close my eyes and listen, maybe I'll feel differently.
Yeah, I enunciate in my head. I guess if I were an actor, it would have been trained out of me by now, but a little nasal.
Have a wonderful rest of your day.
Thank you. Thanks so much.
Thanks
this has
so
really been a
much.
pleasure.
Thanks,
you,
Shref.
See you, Blitz.
I'm a little embarrassed to tell you this, but you'll never believe. I was doing this just before coming upstairs to get to my computer. And while I was in the middle of doing this thing, I was like, oh my God, I'm embarrassed. / I can't wait to tell Arielle that this is what I was doing.
What were you doing?
Plucking my eyebrows.
Oh my God. Yes. No, literally, I was just in Miami visiting my family and my cousin, my Israeli cousin who has the most gorgeous eyebrows. And I was like, can you help me? Because I don't I've never, so I lied down on my grandma's couch and I was like, do what you want with me. And she's the middle part. I was like, okay, we get it, fine. But she refused to shake because she was nervous. But I was like, please, I've never had it done. They look great from
Wait,
here.
you've never had it done?
I've never had them professionally done. No, which now I'm inspired.
We could go together. It could be a thing. We could create content out of it.
Please. My dream is to get properly threaded.
I used to get them waxed when I was younger and then got into it. I'm now in a 10 plus year long relationship and I don't really care anymore. So tweezers here and there just do the trick.
I so relate. I just got a breast reduction 2 months ago, which oh my God, changed my life. Thank you, love. But
this
now
is what
all
everyone
of a sudden,
I know a lot of people who have done the same thing and also say it's changed their lives.
It's, oh my God, the best thing that ever happened. But now I'm now I have a plastic surgeon who's also a dermatologist. And I'm I've always been, what has it been? There's always been, I think, a tension of choosing things for the male gaze, patriarchy, whatever, versus what do I actually want to do? And everyone around me for the last 10 years has been Botoxing it up. And I've just been no, maybe. And then I realized, okay, now at this point, I'm I just want to see what it's like.
Mm-hmm.
But I feel if I give myself permission, then somehow I'm already doing it forever or bad or whatever. But tomorrow I may be getting my first Botox injection just to see what it's like.
I have to know. You're going to have to, we need to follow up.
I will tell you.
I'm worried about doing things like that. I think some of it is, am I giving in to what I think I'm supposed to be doing? Is it something I really want to be doing? Am I curious enough? Do you know what I mean?
100%.
Yeah. It's one of those things where I feel like there are a lot of things that I would want to do in life, to my body, in general, just to see what it's like, but then go back.
Yes.
But I don't think it's that
well,
simple.
Luckily, Botox, I don't even know how long it lasts, but not that long, which I think I was wrestling where I think my curiosity got to the point where now I'm okay, I do want to see what it's like. But then I'm oh my God, what kind of person does it make me if I do it? But then I'm if I'm already self-judging and self-critiquing and turning myself into something, I don't know, but I'm but me as I am, I'm I'm curious. So both sides, the, I don't know, judgmental, more radical feminist, whatever, but also the I have to look a certain way for the patriarchy side. I'm both of those sides. I'm trying to be actually, none of you are relevant here. And I'm curious and I want to see what it's like.
Yeah. Your very last thank you in the book would be mine too. And it's SSRIs. God bless.
So I'm oh my God, truly God bless. Oh my God. So you read the book? Wait, it's in your hand? I haven't even.
It's right here. Being Bad, Breaking the Rules and Becoming Everything You're Not Supposed to Be by Arielle Egozi. The log line is stop giving a fuck about what your stop giving a fuck about your partners, parents, and society expect of you, and ask yourself, what do you really want? I want to get into, because you are my guest gay reader for the day, so we have to talk about what you're reading. But like, my biggest question for you is, do you have a practice to overcome the quote unquote I'm only humanness of it all? Because if the art of being bad is screw what everybody thinks and just do you, we are all so ingrained with what culture and society tells us we're supposed to do. So like, do you have a practice that like helps you get out of that space?
What a beautiful question. I think it's the same practice even with being like the screw you, I'm going to be myself kind of thing, because I think that, at least for me, has also in the past put me into another box where I'm just like responding to what society tells me I'm supposed to do by like doing the opposite. But that doesn't mean it's necessarily what I want to do. And does that make sense? So I've had to go through this whole process, I think, of going from one extreme to the other and then being like, wait, how can I be as gentle and compassionate and soft with myself to see what this body and soul and spirit is actually desiring right now, regardless of what voice it's coming from. And so then I'm able to, I'm still practicing it every day, but then it's less, oh my God, I don't know, terrified to wear the outfit I want to wear outside. And then I'm like, okay, let me hold that for a second. Like, instead of thinking it's bad of me to wear this outfit, which maybe society would tell me, or it's bad of me for being anxious about wearing this outfit, which is maybe what like the being bad perspective might tell me. I'm like, wait, can I hold both parts and be like, how do I feel? What do I actually need right now? Am I in a place where I can hold myself and walk outside and be anxious and still confident and move through that? Or do I just need to like, I don't know, wrap myself in a blanket or feel cozy or be invisible, and that's going to calm me? And I think it's really looking at that instead of, I think, what anything outside of me might say. Yes.
Okay. I love this. I love the concept of acknowledge it, hold it, give it space, ask, why am I feeling this way? Follow-up question, is there something that you do or something, a way to think to allow yourself to not judge yourself? This is just a therapy session. That's all.
No,
for me. How do I not judge myself?
I have a gay therapist from Florida, and this is basically how therapy sessions go. I feel like I don't necessarily call her like my little me anymore as much, but I do feel like there's like a holding of not even just like the inner child of me, but just like the softest parts of me, and be like, wait, like you deserve to feel good and safe. And my job as like the adult form is to protect and show up for whatever those soft parts need. And so then there's like usually I'm panicking all the time. So usually there's like a panic, and then I have to breathe a little bit, slow down, and be like, wait, like what do I actually need in this moment? And fuck whatever anybody, whether it's like past versions of myself or anybody else is like telling me to do, and what do I actually need in this moment? And I will say my partner has probably been the biggest, not just support, but I think they taught me how to do this, because I'd be freaking out and they'd be like, Arielle, hold on, slow down. Like, what do you actually need in this moment? Forget the future, forget what you wish you wanted, forget what you think you should be. Like, where are you now and what do you need right now? And I think that practice has been like, I do it every day, a few times a day, and every day more and more times. And eventually I think I still sometimes don't listen to like myself, but I'm trying really hard to be able to be like, wait, regardless of what anyone thinks or what anyone will think of me, where am I now and what do I need right now? Because that's the only thing that exists.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And not only others around you, but not thinking about the past, not thinking about the future, thinking about this moment. What are these needs right now? Like whenever my husband and I are like we don't really get into arguments, but whenever we're having like a tough conversation, so we can have a tendency to like create scenarios that don't exist just for the sake of making sure we don't get to those places. And it's like, wait, that's not helpful, right? So I think the same is true for this too. Okay, this was my gut instinct of plucking my eyebrows. Why was I plucking my eyebrows? Was it because I knew that I was recording this today, and I, just in case the video picked up the 3 rogue hairs in between my eyes? But I don't want to judge myself for that, because it made me feel good. Whether the camera picks it up or not, it made me feel okay.
And I think that it's so much that it's like the accountability of action and of self and like of grace. And I think for me, there's something so different between, I don't know, someone who gets a bunch of work done and consistently deny it, because that's only sort of bringing more, obviously they're like their own shame,
Right.
but then it also adds, I think, to the shame of people who've chosen or don't have the means to do those things.
Mhm.
And then they think that maybe that's just the way this person looks or whatever. So
Mm-hmm.
I feel like there's a difference between leading with shame, and sometimes we all do it. And again, like just holding space for that, but also leading with, I'm actually aware that this is what makes me feel good, whether it's right, wrong, somewhere in the middle. I have no idea in this moment, but I'm seeing that this is what's going to make me show up as my best self in this moment.
Mhm.
Then fuck yeah, like no one deserves to argue with that, I think, as long as it's not harming other people. But I do feel like there's like the acceptance route or like the shame route. And we all, I think, fluctuate between both of them, sometimes for the same actions. But as long as it's not hurting anyone, then I think do what you want, do what feels good. I don't know.
And I've talked about this so much on the podcast, just the concept of capital T, capital B, the binary, and just like what the universe's expectations are of us as humans, as society, as people. And it's really remembering that we are all individuals, we are all animals, we are all, and then when you think about the world at large, how like insignificant we are.
Yep.
And I think that's like scary too, right? Like people feel the need to project greater than simply because otherwise it's like really scary to think how tiny and insignificant we are.
Which I'm like, I was 10 with existential depression, and that has never went away.
Right.
So I'm like,
sorry if I
yes,
just made
all
that
those
worse.
things. I'm like, all my terrors. Yeah, I mean, I feel like back to the being human, I think we all are still living within the binary under a capitalist structure with like heteronormative. There's just so much that we as individuals, we can have a response to or choose to engage or not engage. But as the animal part of us, right? Like we are physiologically, biologically, like genetically wired to be social creatures. And so as social creatures living in a society that is binary, that is all these things, I'm like, sure, maybe, I don't know, like my partner is trans non-binary and decided to get top surgery 6 months ago. And they were like, I think a part of them was wrestling with, is this not me accepting myself? Can't I accept my body and my identity? And does that have to be in conflict? But I think the reality was maybe in another dimension, in another universe, it'd be no problem. But the reality is we live in this society where they get clocked a certain way or not, and they're having to confront all of these daily things the moment they step out of the house. And so it's okay, what is at their disposal to ease that process for themselves? And if people, you know, we're not living in this binary, then maybe it never would have been a problem in the first place. But we are still, I think, just human and living in this world and trying to do our best with the decisions that we have access to. And yes, are extremely tiny little
and you're
specks
right.
of nothing. So
It's interesting. What I'm hearing is that the top surgery was a response to less about physical discomfort and more about discomfort in how they're presenting in the world and in turn interacting with the world. That's sort of part of what I'm hearing. And I ask that because of, again, society. And if expectations of other humans was different, maybe we would feel differently. My own and I don't mean to interrupt myself interrupting you, but my own experience specifically is when I went on SSRIs, gained a bunch of weight. And my joke is that I'd rather be fat than anxious, which is still 100% true. Would it even be a thing that I'm thinking about if society was like putting on weight as a bad thing? Or would
100%.
maybe I wouldn't even give a shit. It like wouldn't even be something that crossed my mind.
Yeah, and I mean, for my partner, I definitely can't speak for them. And
Sure.
it's like night and day how they move through the world and how they feel in their body than they did before, even privately. So I feel like there definitely was a sense of body stuff. But I can speak for myself with the Botox. I'm like,
Yeah.
I never thought about it. I don't care. But all of a sudden, I'm like, okay, when every single person around me is doing all these things, then I'm like, oh my God, am I going to be the only person left on earth with a forehead wrinkle?
It'll be us. I'll be there with you. We'll be sitting wrinkly. It's because of Florida.
Wrinkly together.
Arielle Egozi, you are my guest gay reader today. What
Yes,
are
hi.
you reading?
Okay, I just finished, what's it called? I have it here. Future Feeling by Joss Lake, which is,
Wait, can I
I am not
you said you have it here.
Yes.
Can I see it? Oh, yeah. Okay.
Have you read it?
No, but I recognize the cover.
The cover, that's why I picked it up. I am not a sci-fi person, 0%. But this is sprinkle of sci-fi, basically about a trans guy in like the near future coming into the self-actualization. I feel like that's the best way to put it. And it's so beautifully, the main character is just so perfectly flawed. And like you relate so much to these feelings of whether it's jealousy, like in this case, he's obsessed with this trans guy influencer who had like the perfect body and all these things. And the protagonist is just, fuck you, I want to see your dark side and all this stuff. And there's all these pieces where like they call going into depression, like the Shadowlands, where people go into and then come out. And ultimately, I feel like it's not just about, because it's not really chosen family. In this near future world, there's this whole operation of a queer community network around the world that sends, if you pay an insurance to it, you have access to. And so I guess this network will, if you're in the Shadowlands, they'll pair you up with someone else to coach you through it and be with you and heal you. And then you watch them become chosen family and support each other through different things. And watching a white Jewish trans guy experience versus a Chinese, transnational adoptee trans person, and like them having certain things they connect over, but certain things that they're like, bro, like this is different.
Right.
And I feel like it just created this world that I never would have imagined, certainly, but where queerness, like the world is being built in a way to support queerness when like the rest of the world does not, it's like the same world we live in now. But yeah, it brought lots of feelings and I loved it. So that's one. And I've been reading The Adult Children of Emotionally Immature Parents.
I think, you know how what we did with COVID tests, they just got sent out nationally. We should do that with that book.
I agree. Have you ever read it? Have you come across it?
No, it's been on my radar. Trust me. Hi, Mom, I love you. I'm sure she's not listening to this. But yeah, I think we should all be able to check it out. Or like at least get the pamphlet version.
Yeah. Some of the things, the way that I feel like I approach certain conversations, this is definitely not the way that some of the things I'm like, that's a little cringy or like whatever. But I feel like if you take a step back, I'm just like, oh, this is explaining my life to me in every possible way. So very helpful. And then finally, look at this cover.
Oh my God, schmutz. That has been on my radar too.
Oh my God, I read it in 2 days. Let me say this though. It is billed as like hilarious, so funny. And I'm like, it's not really that funny. Like the premise is funny. It's like a very Hasidic Orthodox woman in Brooklyn becomes a porn addict when like nobody in her family even has access to a computer, let alone a cell phone or anything like that. And it's actually like it's fascinating and like sad, but like ridiculous enough that you're not like getting down about it. But I would not say it's hilarious. I'm like, oh, this is, a person really wrestling with their identity, with their desires, with their addiction. And you're watching a person with no tools really, I think, to not just exist in society, except in the way that she's been trained to, but no tools to access her own desires or what she wants or doesn't want, or like she doesn't know any words for like body parts. So she's coming up with her own like Yiddish words for all these different things. So that part's a little funny.
Yeah.
But yeah, definitely worth reading.
Okay.
All the books I mentioned, worth reading.
You said the first book you'd picked up because of the cover. Did you know how queer it was when you dove into it?
I feel like I saw the front and then read the back.
And then you're like, okay, buying it.
But it wasn't even, I just saw, this character, a fellow trans man. I was like, okay, so I bought it. But then it sat on my bookshelf for, I don't know, 4 or 5 years at this point.
Totally
because
normal.
I was
That
just like,
happens.
I'm just like, I don't do sci-fi.
Right.
But then my partner read it and I was like, okay, this can be a good like bathroom book. We'll see. But then I loved it.
I love that you say bathroom book, where most people will be like, it's a good poolside book or a good vacation read or on a plane.
No. I have like my little stool. I think some people have, what are they called? Like, not pooper scoopers.
Oh, the
like,
squatty
whatever,
potties.
Squatty potty. I have a little stool and then I keep the book on top next to it and then I like arrange my situation.
Listen, reading on the toilet, that's how you get hemorrhoids.
That's how I got hemorrhoids as a child. Literally, my mom would warn me. And I think by the age of 13, I got them. And I was like, oh, that's what she meant.
And yet you still do it.
I still do it.
But listen, if that's how a book is
though.
getting read, then fine. This has been a delight. I
Same,
didn't
sorry,
know. I didn't know I was going to make my new best friend on this morning.
Same. I'm like, I can't wait to pluck our eyebrows together.
Yes, we're going to pluck our eyebrows. We could try them all. We could do plucking one day. We could do threading another day. We could do waxing another day. And we could do a whole series about it.
I honestly think people would eat that up. I don't know. Listeners,
oh my God,
if you have a preference, let us know.
Thank you, Eliot. Thank you, Arielle. So happy to have you both here. Thank you, everyone. Don't forget to like, follow, share, subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. And I will see you next week. Bye.